What is up, guys? In today's video, we're going to be going over what I think is the best mobility item in Chapter 5 Season 2. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and comment down below which mobility item you think is best. And in this video, or in this season, the current mobility items that we have are going to be the Shockwave grenades and the Icarus wings. So I think the clear winner of this kind of decision is going to be Shockwave grenades, but I've gotten asked about this a decent amount, so I'm still going to cover it. And I think before we kind of get into the items themselves, just in Fortnite in general, I think it's kind of best to sort mobility items into two different categories. So there's like rotational mobility items, so items that are going to be good for like traveling around the map or getting from point A to point B, but not necessarily that good at fighting. And then we have like fighting mobility, so items that are really useful for being able to push an enemy in a fight or reposition in a fight or just completely get away from a fight. These items fall into completely opposite categories, I think. So, and they're like far in that category, there's not much middle ground. I think the shockwaves are really good fighting mobility items, but you probably wouldn't want to use it just to travel around the map that much because you would quickly run out of them. And then the wings are a decent or definitely a rotational item. They're not really that good in a fight in zero build. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about zero build public matches. I probably should have said that. That is what I cover on my channel. Competitive is completely different and often has different loot pools. But like I said, shockwaves, clearly a fighting item. Icarus wings, clearly a rotational item. Not really that great of, not really that useful in pushing an enemy or getting away from an enemy. However, the main problem, I think, is that the wings are probably the worst rotational mobility item we've ever had because they are incredibly easy to punish. So, for some reason, the way the Icarus wings work is that the player using the wings become a part of their hitbox. And if you guys don't know what a hitbox is in a game, that's the area you can shoot to register a hit. So when someone's using the wings, you can just hit the wing and then that counts as you hitting the player. So they make their hitbox much larger, right? And if they fly high, they expose themselves to multiple angles or like more angles, anyone in the area pretty much. So if you fly decently high, not even like super high, but if you're at all in the air, which is what you're going to be doing if you're flying, you're making your hitbox much larger and you're exposing yourself to a bunch of different angles. And with Chapter 5, they made all the weapons projectile, so they have bullet travel time. This, in theory, should make it harder for you to shoot people out of the air, right? However, the wings are like decently large horizontally, so you can just aim a bit in front of the player and you have a pretty decent shot of hitting the player or the wing itself, and regardless, you do a decent amount of damage. I've even had times where like you can just aim right on the player and then your bullets are probably going to hit the backside of the wing. So like when you're shooting the winged player, you want to kind of be aiming for the wing itself and not as much the player because you do have like a large horizontal area that will register a hit. But even if you do just aim right on the player, it's very easy to beam people out of the wings. And even when you are using the wings, if you stay low to the ground or use your dash as well to kind of move around quickly, you're still putting yourself decently at risk, and it's pretty likely you're going to take a good amount of damage if you're fighting, if you are at all near someone who has like okay aim, right? And what's going to happen when you get shot when you're using these wings is either you're going to have to slowly kind of glide to the ground, probably taking more damage while you're gliding to the ground, or do the dive effect, which will get you to the ground faster, but puts you in an animation when you land, making you still a very easy vulnerable target. If you stay low to the ground, it is true that you have more kind of potential room to recover, or it's not going to take you as long to hit the ground, or, you don't have to worry about doing the dive. So you're going to be able to quickly make your hitbox smaller, at least, which is great. However, even if you're low to the ground, if you start getting shot, you can get out of the wings decently easily, but you might be potentially stranded in like a no man's land area with not much cover. So you kind of have to choose like, do I land here where there's not much cover and at least make my hitbox smaller? Or do I kind of try to go somewhere where there's cover, and then all the while doing that, my hitbox is still gigantic. So I feel like you're in kind of like a lose-lose scenario when using these wings, even if you use it well, if there is anybody in the area near you at all. And that's like not something that you can always know, like every time you use them, you're taking a gamble that like hopefully no one has line of sight on you, or nobody finds you. And like I just touched on, if you're high up, you might take a while to get to the ground, taking more damage. If you're low to the ground, it's going to be easier for you to recover from that situation. But when the fight breaks out, you kind of don't get to choose when that breaks out, you know? And if you're using the wings as your mobility item, it's going to be much harder for you to kind of recover or to like put yourself in a good situation. Like if you get caught in a field, you got in a field, and now you're caught in a field with no mobility item and probably just going to lose as well, you know? So it's like, I feel like there's little upside and a lot of risk with these wings. And that's like an easy way to describe it, I guess. Anytime you use them, you're taking a huge gamble that there's nobody in the area with decent aim at all. And even if you do get beamed and then get to the ground, you're either probably going to get beamed out of the sky and maybe just elimed. But even if you live that, you're probably starting a fight at a decent HP deficit, which is also not great, you know? And when you compare this to the other rotational item in the game right now, which is cars, I think the wings are even worse because the cars don't consume an inventory slot, obviously. And then they also give you more options. Like you can get shot out of a car easily if you have somebody with decent aim, especially if you're driving straight at them. But it's a bit harder to shoot someone out of a car, I think, than the wings. And then you have more options. Like, you know, you can get out of the car and use it as cover. You can get out of the car and shockwave. You can maybe drive away to cover if the person isn't actively hitting you. Like both items have the kind of problem of if you encounter somebody, that's not great for you. But I feel like it's easier for using a car to recover from that situation, or you have more options to deal with that situation than you do with the wings, where your choices are to either get beamed out of the air or potentially land in an area where there's not much cover. Whereas like the car itself can be used as cover, and the windshield, the windows block a shot's worth of damage, which is great at kind of countering snipers. So I, for all of chapter 5, have thought cars are really good because of the like very prominent sniper meta. And so if I'm using cars as my rotational item, and I kind of want to have a car with me in game anyways to kind of limit how much I can get sniped, why would I ever want to use the wings? You know, I would much rather use a car and shockwaves than a wing and just no shockwaves, or a wing and shockwaves and then have 2 inventory slots dedicated to mobility items. So again, just to summarize, I think the risk isn't worth the reward with wings. And I think the shockwaves are just much better. I think the wings kind of just remind me of a worse version of the rocket ram from chapter 4, season 4. And I would like to see them change this item to where the wings aren't the entirety of the play, like don't count as a hitbox. I think that's very bizarre. And I think even if it wasn't super easy to beam people out of the sky with the wings, like if the hitbox wasn't larger, I think it would be like a pretty balanced mobility item. Like it's not the greatest at pushing, it's not the greatest at getting away from a fight, but you could travel around the map quickly and not have to like worry about just being a free kill if you encounter anybody, you know, at least in zero build pubs. So now let's talk about shockwaves, because I think shockwaves are one of the better fighting mobility items in all of Fortnite history, and they've always been good pretty much. In this season, there's actually 2 NPCs that sell them as of the time I'm recording this video. So the Medusa NPC is at fencing, and the Jules NPC is at the gas station west of Lavish Lair. It's 200 gold for 2 shockwaves, which is expensive, but I think this is the easiest season ever to get gold in, and I actually did make a video about that yesterday, which will be linked down in the description below if you're worried at all about getting gold. But I just think shockwaves are really, really good fighting mobility item, and the fact that there's an NPC at fencing fields that sells it means that if you ever need shockwaves, you can just go there, because fencing is like relatively the center of the map. You know, if you're late into the game and fencing's not in zone, then you're not going to be able to go there. But if you're like first, second zone and you're like, oh shoot, I got no shockwaves, maybe you take a trip to fencing, buy some shockwaves, and then now you have that problem solved. It's very good. And I think shockwaves are just a great fighting mobility item because it allows you to quickly go in whatever direction you want based on where you are in relation to the shockwave when it goes off. If you want to go at somebody, you can do that. If you want to go straight up, you can do that. If you want to go straight down, like you're in a house and you want to break through the floor, you can just throw it up and do that. Sideways, you can use it to quickly push somebody after getting a snipe or AR tags on them. Or let's say someone's using the wings, you tag them good out of the sky, and then they like kind of crash land behind a tree. You can just shockwave at them, and then now you probably have 100 plus HP advantage on them and quickly kind of get that kill and finish that kill with the shotgun. You can use it to quickly reposition without taking much damage because it does move you really fast. You don't like where you are at the start of a fight or during a fight. You can use it to force opponents out of bushes or from behind cover or off of high ground like a mountain. if you have somebody in a bunker, shockwaving yourself up and then throwing a shockwave into their bunker can just force them out of a bunker and kind of turn what would be a really bad situation for you into a much more playable situation. If you tag someone and they go behind any sort of cover, like in buildings, you can kind of just quickly shockwave yourself backwards through the walls and kind of surprise them and get an easy kill. And I think a lot of players kind of shy away from shockwaves because they can be a somewhat difficult or weird item to use, but I feel like it's one of those things that, like, once you get the hang of shockwaves, you kind of got it. Like, once it clicks, you know, and then you have that skill from now until the end of time. And they've been an item that have kind of come and gone from Fortnite for a long time. Like, if you're someone who's been playing Zero Build, I think there's only like 3 seasons or 2 seasons of Zero Build where shockwaves weren't in the meta. Like, pretty much ever since Zero Build came out, I think aside from Chapter 4 Season 1 and 2, shockwaves were in the loot pool, and they were like a prominent part of the loot pool, and they were like very good mobility items. So I think it's worth investing the time to kind of practice and get used to them. I will have a video linked down in the description below that I made about shockwave tips. It's a bit of an older video, but the items themselves haven't changed. And if you're interested in learning how to use shockwaves, I would highly, highly, highly recommend watching that video, because 5 to 10 minutes worth of practicing and then like the time it takes you to watch that video, I think you'll be much better with them. And then, like I said, it's an item that you kind of have, you know how to use anytime it comes back into the loot pool, which seems to be fairly often in Zero Build. So if you want to get better at Zero Build, I think learning how to use shockwaves is very important. And even in Chapter 5 Season 2, I think they're the premier mobility item, and I think they're a lot better than the Icarus wings for public matches. And I kind of talked about this at the start of the video. I kind of meant to cover this before I went into anything else. But the reason why people will watch competitive Fortnite tournaments and be like, oh, these players are using like crash pads last season, or they're using the Icarus wings, that must be the good mobility item. But the reason why that is because the loot pools are different. Like, shockwaves aren't in competitive. So last season, when you saw a lot of people using crash pads, you know, were fine in pubs, but the shockwaves were just a better item, and they were in the public match loot pool, and they weren't in the competitive loot pool. And that's why you saw like the grapple blade and crash pads being significantly more sought after items in comp than shockwaves, because shockwaves didn't exist in comp. So I hope that kind of makes sense. This season, you'll probably see a decent amount of people using the Icarus wings in competitive, especially in builds, because there's things you can do to kind of negate some of the downsides in builds, like kind of bouncing yourself off a build. That way you just go straight and you don't deploy the wings. But for Zero Build public matches, I think shockwaves are far and away better than the wings. And I think once you put the time in to get used to them, you'll really like them. I've seen a lot of people say the wings are fun to fly around with, and if you just enjoy using them, that's cool, whatever. I actually feel the opposite. Like, an item like that you just use and it kind of does its thing, it's just flying around the map isn't fun to me. But what's like fun, I think, is shockwaves. Like, shockwaves are a very fun and rewarding item to me personally, because of all of the different ways you can use them and all of the different like plays you can make using them, you know? So that's what I really like about shockwaves, and what makes them a fun item to me is like the creative ways and like the plays that you can make using them. Not so much just like, oh, I hit my button and now I'm flying. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you guys found this helpful, informative, interesting. Like I said, the video on how to use shockwaves and some shockwave tips will be linked down in the description below if you are like newer to the game and haven't taken the time to master them. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, sub if you'd like to see more. Let me know down in the comments below which item you think is better, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.